All right, so let me introduce you to Jack Malcolm. He is a trainer, coach, and author of Specialized in Sales, Presentations, and Personal Influence, primarily for Fortune 500 companies of B2B technology sales. He's the author of 2 books, Bottom Line Selling and Strategic Sales Presentation, and writes a daily blog called Practical Eloquence. In almost a quarter century in the business, he has not only trained thousands of people to succeed in high-stakes presentations, but has had to deliver a few himself to ensure the survival of his business. Please welcome Jack Malcolm.
All right, I'm going to start with a question. How many of you are chomping at the bit to give this presentation on May 19th? How many of you are so excited? Wow, that's great. That's actually more than I expected. Okay. All right, we've got another one back there. I want to talk to you today about the importance of the pitch. I think you've been hearing a lot about it, but I just want to hit you with 3 main points. I'm not here today to talk about the mechanics of the presentation. Sue Washer did an excellent job of doing that. I'm not here to talk to you about how to stand in front of the group and how to structure your presentation or anything like that. I just want to share with you 3 simple truths that I've seen in my quarter century of training salespeople in high-stakes sales presentations. And as Sandy said in her introduction to me, I've had to do this myself. I've never given a venture capital pitch, I'll tell you that right now. But I have given presentations where I knew that by the end of that day I would walk out with a contract that would be personally worth high 6 figures to me. One of them even low 7 figures over the course of the contract. And I've won several of those, and that's the only reason I've been able to stay in business for 18 years. I've also lost a couple of those. I probably learned more from the ones that I've lost than the ones that I've won. So let me share with you 3 simple things. You need to think differently, you need to deliver differently, and you need to prepare differently. Let me talk about the first one, and I'm going to spend the most time on that. One of the presentations that I gave, I still remember the date, October 22nd, 2003. And I think it was a world record for furthest distance travel for the shortest presentation in front of a client. I flew from Fort Lauderdale, Florida to Auckland, New Zealand to deliver a 45-minute presentation to a company that was in the market for a global sales training firm. And they had gone all over the globe and narrowed it down to a short list and selected 4 firms, and mine was one of the 4, fortunately. Every single competitor was multiple times the size of my company. And we were told, you will have 45 minutes to present and 45 minutes of Q&A. And that's exactly what every one of my competitors did. They came in and they give beautiful, polished, great PowerPoint presentations, and what do you think they talked about? That's right, they talked about themselves. They talked about how great they were. They talked about their training programs. It's what we call a bake-off of features. I went last on the agenda. That was not an accident, by the way, but that's outside the scope of the 10 minutes that I have. We can always cover that in the Q&A. But I went last, and I did something completely different from everybody else. We weren't able to see each other's presentations, but I found out about this later. Instead of talking for 45 minutes about my company, they had all that information already. They had that in the response to the proposal. I talked about them. I talked about the challenges that I knew they had based on the research I had done, based on the people that I had talked to before I'd gotten there. I talked about some of the challenges that they didn't even know they had, and said, this is what you're going to face, and if you want this to work, this is what needs to happen. I spoke for 15 minutes instead of 45 minutes, and I never once spoke about my company. At the end of it, the Q&A actually lasted an hour and a half. And when you are the only person standing between 13 thirsty Kiwis and happy hour, and they're willing to take an hour and a half to question you, you know you've done the right thing. And at the end of it, the highest ranking person in the room, who, by the way, before that presentation was my main opponent, came up and said, superb presentation you gave. and I ended up winning that business. That presentation was worth 7 figures to me because I did what I call outside-in thinking. Outside-in thinking is, what do the people want to hear? Abraham Lincoln said that if he had 3 hours to give a presentation, he would spend 2 hours thinking about what the audience wanted to hear and an hour thinking about what he wanted to say. You're going to be presenting to investors. What do investors want? They don't want to hear about the technology. Sure, the technology is important. They don't want to hear about the business. Sure, the business is important. What they want to hear is, what's in it for me? What can I invest in that's going to give me a high return and low risk? So think about it. Put yourself in the audience's shoes. Focus on what's important to them and speak to them directly. That's the first one. Think differently, outside-in thinking. The second one is something that Sue Washer said and has already been said a lot today, so I won't belabor the point that much. But it's about how to connect with an audience and the importance of connecting with an audience. When I wrote my book, Strategic Sales Presentations, I interviewed dozens of executives and said, what are the important things that you see, or what are some experiences that you've had in presentations that are made to you to sell to you? And a friend of mine who is the Senior Vice President of Investor Relations at Qualcomm Corporation out in San Diego told me a story that they went out and did a search for a public relations firm, and again had the same short list type of situation that I was in. And a team came in from Hill and Knowlton and gave a presentation that was so good that literally the last person was just outside the door when the CEO, Paul Jacobs, looked at my friend Bill and said, hire them. Here's the important thing. The numbers, the data, the technology, all that stuff is very important. But people that are going to give you money are making an investment based on 2 types of thinking. There's a guy by the name of Daniel Kahneman who wrote a book called Thinking Fast and Slow, and I won't get into all the technicality of it. But we all think with a system 2, which is the logical, analytical, data-based, slow type of decision, which is what your spreadsheets and your business plans are going to talk about. We also make decisions based on what's called System 1 thinking. It's the unconscious processes that are going on in our mind. So the investors are looking at you and are saying, is my money going to be safe with you? Are you somebody that I can believe in? Are you somebody that I can trust, that I can have confidence in? So you've got to make that connection. And the only technical part I would tell you about making a connection is be candid, be absolutely honest. As Sue Washer said, get the weaknesses out in front early. Don't blow smoke at them, because they've heard it all before. And if they know there's a weakness and you don't bring it out, forgive me for being blunt, they're only going to think 1 or 2 things. You're either ignorant or you're dishonest. So bring it out, or both. Absolutely. So be candid and then be confident. Confidence, passion, all the things that show that you truly believe in what you're doing. They can't believe unless they see that you believe in it yourself. So that brings me to the third thing, and that's something you've already heard about. It's the most common sense you will hear today, and the least likely that anybody in this room will do this. And that is prepare, prepare, prepare. Prepare, practice, rehearse. Do not leave it to chance. Everybody says, yes, I know it's important to prepare. I know it's important to outwork everybody. But people don't do it. You wait until the last minute. Do you know when you should be starting on your presentation? Yesterday. That's right. You should be starting on your presentation as soon as possible, because the first cut is not going to be good. The second cut may be good, but it's not going to be great. The third cut may not be great, but at least you have a better chance. Practice it, prepare, and rehearse. I want to give you one more addition to that story, that Hill and Knowlton story. I also had the privilege of interviewing the team from Hill and Knowlton that gave that presentation that won them so much money. And my friend who had listened to the presentation didn't even know this side of it. The team leader of that presentation, the one who was scheduled to give that presentation that day and to lead the team presentation, had a family emergency the day before and could not show up. But they got there, and despite the fact that the key person could not show up, they still were able to deliver a spot-on presentation that focused from the customer's point of view, focused from the audience's point of view in your case. So number one, outside-in thinking. Number two, they made a personal connection. And that personal connection, over here you said that you need to be real. You do need to be real, but you also need to be real good. And that's where the preparation comes in. So these are the three things, and I'm going to leave you with one more story. I started out this talk by asking how many people were so excited about the presentation that you're going to give. And this will also go back to preparation. Jack Welch used to spend hours and hours and hours preparing his presentations. And there's a story that Bill Lane, the speechwriter, writes in a book called Jacked Up, where Jack Welch was invited to give a presentation at Bechtel Corporation for their 100th anniversary. And he was going to be speaking on the same day as George Shultz, former Secretary of State, Charles Schwab, and Jack Welch, whose time was probably at that time more valuable than any other person on the planet, personally invested 8 hours of his time just preparing the outline of his presentation. Bill Lane, the speechwriter, spent 8 hours, and then they spent another 16 hours together just practicing for an 8-minute presentation. And Jack Welch, at the end of it, said, "I can't wait to get out there and do this. I can't wait to do this." And you can imagine when you have that feeling from that preparation, from thinking from the customer's point of view, the audience's point of view, and from being yourself, I hope that everybody in here will be able to answer the question, "I can't wait to get out there and give that pitch." Thank you.
I have a question.
That was great questions.
First, a piece of information. Jack will be there on the 14th in the mock, to be a mock judge. So you're going to have one of the world's pros helping to prepare you.
And I won't be nice.
So Jack, I have a question that always comes up and I want to get your feedback on it. How many of these folks should be thinking about a visual aid during their talk? Rather than just a PowerPoint, but some kind of physical visual aid?
First of all, the most important visual aid, anybody tell me what it is? It's you. There's a reason that you're there to give that pitch, right? People want to look you in the eyes. They want to see that you believe in what you're saying. They want to ask you questions. Everything up here is an aid. Martin Luther King didn't have PowerPoint. Winston Churchill didn't have PowerPoint. Abraham Lincoln didn't have PowerPoint. So the most important visual aid is you. These are helpful to help to either clarify or add impact. Some of your technologies, you may need visual aids to clarify. And some of the impact, like Sue Washer said in hers, showing that picture of the carrot with the nematodes on it, that would add impact. So those are the two things I would tell you about visual aids. Yes?
When you're engaging a group in conversation, when you're speaking to the group, what are some of the techniques that you use to gauge the temperature or the reaction of going on to what you're saying, that it may be different than you initially planned it to be?
Okay. The first thing that I want to say, and I had to cut my presentation short because of time constraints, where I would have said this, is all that everybody tells you about, use this gesture and have the variety in your voice and how you stand and all that, it all comes down to three things. It's what your mother told you when you were a kid and you're meeting people for the first time, right? Stand up straight, look people in the eye and smile. Now I want to take that middle one, look people in the eye. That is the most important thing you can give in a presentation, because a presentation is not a transmit mode. A presentation is a conversation. You look at people, if their heads are nodding, it's doing well. If they're starting to look at their iPhones or they're looking at the computer screen, then you better do something to shake it up. So it's all about paying attention. And that kind of goes back to the visual aid thing. Because if your visual aids are so complex that you have to keep looking back to see what's up there to remind yourself where you are, then you're going to lose the ability to do that.
Questions? You have time for your other story if you said you got cut short, if there was something else. There is a question here.
Yes.
You made 3 points. Think differently, prepare differently, and
Is deliver differently. Make that personal connection. It's not a transmit, it's a conversation. Be yourself, but be your best self.
I have one here.
Expand on being last. I was trying to tell my team to do that.
yes.
Yes. The other part, and the reason I call my book Strategic Sales Presentations, is that the presentation itself is not a standalone event. All of the work that you do beforehand, I made sure that I got to know who some of the people were in the audience, all of my research. In my sales practices, and I specialize in business-to-business sales, complex sales, I always tell people, find a champion, somebody who will support you because they believe in you. I found a champion, and my champion asked me about what I could do to help him. I didn't ask him for any information that he wasn't allowed to give or anything, but I said, can you help me to go last? And here's the reason I did that. These folks were going to be sitting in for an entire day listening to an hour and a half of presentations. At the end of the day, and Ricardo, you said this, they're going to remember a couple of things. They're going to forget almost 100% of what was said that day. They're going to remember how you made them feel. They're also going to remember either the first or the last the most. So now that I've said that, fortunately it's going to be random so that everybody's not competing.
I do accept
for
bribes.
this.
I am bribable.
Come here, my friend, I buy you booze.
In your case, you're going to be one of 12 people presenting over the course of the time that it takes to do 12 times 15 minutes, 180 minutes, 3 hours, right? So they're not going to remember most of that. So if you're not first or last, you better do something to stand out.
We have one.
Do you have any tricks to help get over stage fright? Because I think a lot of people suffer from that.
Yes. I have lots of tricks to get over stage fright because I used to be the world's most nervous person. First one is not a trick at all. If you truly prepare and rehearse, then you're still going to feel the nerves, but you're going to know that you can do it. The second one is really, again, it's not a trick, it's called reframing. Is realize that those nerves are your friend. If you're not nervous, you should be worried. If you're nervous, it's because your body and your brain is gearing up for superior performance. It's the fight or flight syndrome. So realize that those nerves are very natural. They're going to propel you to better performance as long as you don't let them beat you. And then the third one is a trick, is just take a deep breath or two before you start.
I wanted to add to that. I am scared to death of standing and talking to people. I think it's because when I was 6 or 7 or 8, I did something that might have embarrassed me in front of a class. Many of us forget that we're not 6. I'm 60. So I've learned a little along the way, number one. And the other thing I heard this once is that the nerves, the way you feel when you're a little concerned, which I noticed your upper lip, you move your lips like this when you're looking at it.
I have to watch the video.
Well, it's a micro thing. The nervousness is just... Okay, now this will be it. He'll be going right now. Let me tell you about this. No, it's not 99.9% will never even notice it. But it's the same physiological effect in your body as excitement.
Exactly.
And if you can reframe "I'm scared to death" to "Man, I'm excited to get up and tell these people my story." So my question is, Michael Bosworth, you know him? Solution Selling.
Right.
How are you different than he?
I don't know Michael's work well enough to tell you very specifically, but I work in the same space that he does. Solution selling, consultative selling, challenger selling, insight selling, there's many different ways of looking at it. It's all the same basic idea. It starts with outside-in thinking, and people aren't buying a product for the sake of buying a product. The old saying in sales is people don't buy quarter-inch drill bits, they buy quarter-inch holes. So it's all about understanding why do they need that hole drilled, where does it need to be drilled, and then what's the best way to do that.
We have one more question, time for one more.
Wait a minute. Jack, great stuff, man. I feel comfortable doing presentations, but I've been taking a lot of notes, and I hope that people are really taking a lot of notes. We're in a process right now on probably every table at this time, thinking about who will do the presentation and the backup. If you were leading at one of these tables, what would you be doing? What kind of conversations would you be having, or what would you say to the team of who should give the presentation?
Great question.
Everything that you are learning here is not about the pitch you're going to be giving on the 19th, is it? It's all about skills that you can take with you. So I would challenge each and everybody in the team here, who is the most scared, the least willing to want to give that presentation? You should be clamoring to volunteer to do that. That's a challenge there.
It's still a competition.
So any feedback on personalities, or really literally just the one that's the most afraid?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
So you're suggesting literally the one that's most afraid to go do it?
Well, I didn't say who you should pick. Notice I didn't answer the question. I just said that everybody really should be clamoring to do that. So I think the team will listen, and if not, what's your name, Jim? If you want to borrow Jim to look at the micro-expressions to see if any of them are really faking it, then go ahead and do that. But since he's a mentor,
Can I offer just a little bit of advice there for you guys? Last time, one of the teams did not do tryouts. They just said, who wants to do it? And a guy raised his hand. He did not show up on the day. And the backup presenter was not ready because this guy was going to do it. They had to be disqualified. So I highly suggest you do tryouts. And you make sure that both your number one presenter and your backup presenter are going to be there.
That's a very good point. And I was also asked by someone here today, how do you get up and speak? And I told her what I broke through, because I was very, very, very shy in high school and college. I couldn't even like anybody looking at me if they called my attention. I was very shy. And I did things to break through that, because I had professors say, well, just avoid any kind of profession that you have to do public speaking. I thought that was a mistake. You have to go the opposite way. And I did. When I was 20, I ended up 2 years of modeling, because there I knew all the eyes were going to look at me, and it had to break me. And it did break me, because I would go down that runway, I couldn't even crack a smile. I looked like I was, bad, But I finally got through it. And I'm not saying to go to modeling school, but I did jump into a fear, and that helped.
As they say, it is the number one fear in America, right? And number two fear is death. So I'm stealing a line from Jerry Seinfeld, but he said that means that if you're at a funeral, you're better off being the one in the coffin than the one delivering the eulogy. And seriously, I was terrified of speaking, and that's why I took the actual advice that I just gave you a minute ago. I put myself into an environment that forced me to do it. I joined the Toastmasters Club about 30 years ago. I haven't been to a Toastmasters Club in over 10 years, but I love the organization, and I strongly urge, if anybody is afraid of public speaking, that is one of the best places that you can go. And it is literally, I didn't have time to bore you with my biography, but I started out as a banker because all I wanted to do was crunch numbers and not have anything to do with people, because I was so afraid of that. I was so introverted. And that's what put me on the career path that I'm on today. And that's how I can make a living, getting up in front of groups, even though I'm always nervous. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you very much.